Great. Yes, as John says, I'll be talking about the prehistoric activity in early medieval rural industry at the Upper Dalhousie Quarry in Midlothian. So the site itself is located to the south of Edinburgh between Honeyberg and Rosewell. And so excavations by CFA Archaeology has begun in 2008, and it's been going on until 2022. So work began on targeted trenches on two plateaus, which are outlined in blue there, which had crop marks indicative of Neolithic settlement. There was also a scheduled monument to the northeast, which is marked in brown there, and that is for Whitbog enclosure, which is a twin palisade enclosure thought to be prehistoric. So based on these results, it was decided that all works associated with the quarry would be monitored, and so that took place over 10 phases. 8 areas of interest have been sort of highlighted here, which are picked out due to concentrations of the archaeology. But we'll be looking at the site chronologically today, so we'll be jumping between the areas. So starting with the early Neolithic, the spreads of pits were identified in 3 areas, areas B, C, and F. There were no structures identified associated with this period, but the pits themselves and the activity associated with them can be quite indicative of the settlement, can be just as indicative of settlement as the houses themselves. So the best way of understanding the activity taking place at this time is through the environmental evidence. So the pits showed evidence of crop processing of emmer wheat and in the roasting of hazelnut shells, because there was a lot of roasting pits, particularly in area F in that plateau. Also evidence of the crop processing was a quern rubber found in area C. So that's one of the bottom right. So this quern rubber here pictured, it's used for grinding grain. So the rubber stone is the top part, which is used to, a removable part on the quern to grind the grain. After this one was used as a rubber stone, it was then used as a hammerstone, possibly for flint working. And then it was subjected to high levels of heat, which is causing all that fracturing. It would then become unusable, and it was obviously discarded in this pit. And that's the pit there. Also quite indicative of we also identified a number of these pits through the pottery themselves. So the pottery was early Neolithic carinated bowl and modified carinated bowl. It was identified across 22 of the features across the site. The largest grouping was from the pit, which is marked by the arrow there. It contains 76 sherds of pottery, and some of those are drawn up there. The pit was radiocarbon dated to around 3,900, 3,650 BC. So that matches the dates of the pottery quite well. So moving on to the Middle and Late Neolithic, these can be separated as well as the Early Neolithic. And again, the spreads of pits, again, maybe indicative of settlement, identified within areas C, D, and F. As with the Early Neolithic people, they were revisiting the same sites. So areas C and F, which had Early Neolithic activity, also contained Middle and Late Neolithic activity. We're not saying that there was continuous activity across those periods, but we're probably returning to them multiple times. There were 3 very interesting features identified within area F on that plateau, with high concentrations of pottery that show clear variations between the pottery between each of the 3 pits, which indicate a slight differences in the data deposition. So there would have been more continuous flow of the types of pottery throughout them if there was continuous use, but all 3 showed slightly different variations. So that also shows that we're coming back at different times. We'll have a closer look at some of those pits. So this pit here, 310, you can see the high levels of the pottery in that band all the way through it. There's also found really high quantities of poorly fired pottery and very clay as well. Sorry. Yes, sorry. The middle pit here, this showed to contain a collection of flints that may have been intentionally collected together and deposited to represent the later stages of tool production. So the 2 photos on the left, they show worked flint cores. They show 2 different types of flint mapping. There was the products of the flint mapping, so that was showing a number of flakes and blades inside the pit. And the photo on the right, that shows a retouched fine chiseled arrowhead. So we're seeing all the different stages of tool production in this one pit. And the different types of methods seems interesting to be collected together and deposited in one place. The specialist thought it was probably intentional. So this pit was dated to around 3,300 to 2,900 BC. And that fits with the date of the chisel arrowhead. So looking at the early Bronze Age, there was actually only one feature which could be securely dated to the early Bronze Age. There was a whole spread of beaker pottery identified across the pits, but it was very heavily abraded, which means it moved around a lot. So either the pottery was on the surface, has moved around by ploughing, or the plough has maybe disturbed earlier features and we're missing that early Bronze Age activity on the site. There's one feature, which was identified in Area B, contained a rim shade of a late beaker food vessel, which is drawn up here. These are typically associated with funerary contexts, but in this case, there's no evidence for that. And actually having a date for this, which was around 1950 to 1700 BC, is actually quite an important date to have that types of pottery in a different context, possibly domestic, we're not sure. So our highest levels of activity on site was in the Middle Bronze Age. So they were identified in areas D, E, and F. It was very much more concentrated on area F on that plateau there. And it might indicate that it's associated with that witch bog enclosure, the scheduled monument nearby, which is assumed to be prehistoric. So Bronze Age, possibly maybe Iron Age, but without any actual dating evidence from it, we can't be sure these are associated. But the closeness of them to it might be an indication. There were two stakeholder alignments on area F, which is pictured, one of them pictured here, where these possibly acted as windbreaks, which might indicate the working areas. And the working areas might have been outside of these defined spaces by the scheduled monument. So, but the most interesting feature from this period was actually identified in area D, which is in the south bit. You should recognize it from your programs. So, this one singular pit, pit 4136, was found in a group of features dating from the Neolithic, the Bronze Age, and the early medieval period. The axe hammer, which you can see in the picture just on the bottom, it was found alongside an abraded shade of beaker pottery, so that was for early Bronze Age pottery, which I mentioned before, and 6 undiagnostic flint flakes. The pit itself was dated to around 1700 to 1500 BC, and the date does coincide with the expected range of a stone axe hammer of this type. Having a closer look at the axe hammer, you can see it pictured here. So stone axe hammers are thought to be wedges for splitting wood. So this one here was made from a cobble blank rather than from quarried stone. And it allowed the original surface to become incorporated into the shape of the stone axe hammer. And it didn't therefore need too much surface modification to get its intended shape. So the blade itself shows evidence of damage. I don't know if you can see that there. And this may indicate a reason why the stone axe hammer was deposited in the pit. It still probably could have been used at this stage. So there may have been another reason, but we're not sure. They may have been coming back to collect it. Sometimes things were deposited and we redug up when they returned to site, but this one never was. The finding of this is important because even though a number of these have been found across Scotland or in museums in Scotland, there's no occurrences of these tools from actual secure archaeological contexts, and therefore there's no secure radiocarbon dates associated with them. The typologies of them do match what our radiocarbon dates are, so they do have it correct. So it does just prove this. So moving on to the late Bronze Age, this was only found in one area, which is area F. So it might just be a continuation of that activity from the Middle Bronze Age into sort of the late Bronze Age. And again, this could actually more link closely to the scheduled monument, but again, without dates, we can't be sure. A single roundhouse was identified, which is circled in red on the map. And that was actually the only domestic structure identified on the site from any period. The roundhouse was comprised of 7 pits in a circular fashion, and is very typical of the late Bronze Age style of roundhouses. This one was dated to around 1000 to 800 BC, placing it at the very end of the late Bronze Age. Again, there was lots of pit digging around the roundhouse, but only a few can confidently be found to be contemporary with it. One such feature contained a saddle quern or quern rubber. So I mentioned quern rubbers earlier as part of the Early and Neolithic, but this one couldn't actually identify to be either the quern itself or the rubber. This sort of shape and the flatness of the surface is very difficult for this period to identify which one it is. Sorry. This one here was created by splitting a boulder of sedimentary rock in half, which gets back to that shape. So I did mention that the only domestic structure was the roundhouse. We did identify a palisade, which is in area A, which can be linked to the Bronze Age. but these can also be linked to the early medieval period. Unfortunately, we can't actually date this feature, so we can't be sure if it links to the Bronze Age or the early medieval features I'm about to talk about. So therefore, it doesn't add too much to the story of the site, but it does show another feature that was existing there. So moving on to the early medieval period, there are 3 areas that contained early medieval activity. So area D in the bottom, on the southern corner, that contained ironworking furnaces and waste pits. Area E in the northern corner contained an L-shaped enclosure and a corn drying kiln. And area G, just below that, contained a corn drying kiln and a cremation. I'll be talking about them chronologically where possible, so we'll be looking at area G first, that small one. So area G here only contained a single feature. It's a corn drying kiln, which is a very simple bowl furnace kiln with a potential flue off to the south. The large stone in the flue may be a stone baffle or maybe surviving support of a superstructure that's ended up within the flue of the kiln. The base, as you can see, is very scorched red, and there was a very thick layer of burnt cereal grain and a charcoal which deposit above it, which is probably the remains of the last firing of the kiln, and that could be why it fell out of use if there was a burning activity. The cremation itself was placed above the buried grain at the north end of the kiln, which you may have seen in both the picture and the drawing. This feature was really heavily truncated, possibly by ploughing, because it was only 6 centimeters deep surviving within the bowl of the kiln. And so initially it was identified as a prehistoric cremation on site, because cremation is very unusual for the early medieval period. But the dating of this actually proved it was early medieval. So we'll have a look at cremation. So this cremation was dated to between the 5th and 6th centuries AD, and it's the remains of an unsexed possible adult. It seems to be intentionally inserted into the kiln after it fell out of use, and it may represent somebody who was associated with the kiln, but we can't know that for sure. There's no comparable examples of cremations inside corn drying kilns, as I can find. However, there's an example from the south of England and one in Ireland of an inhumation or a body being placed inside a corn drying kiln. But the one in the south of England was thought to be a murder, as he was essentially chucked in and face down. It's actually a very interesting read. But there is an association of human remains with human remains and burials in Anglo-Saxon England and with the cremations at Fort Teviot in Perth and Kinross, with close to pits containing large quantities of charred grains. So there is that association, so it's not completely unusual for this to exist, but it is actually a very unusual practice at this time. Most commonly in this period, they were buried in kists, which are stone-lined graves. So area E, which is just to the north of that cremation, the most identifiable feature on site is this big L-shaped ditch forming an enclosure. So it was quite interesting, but you can't see from this image, but it was actually on a northeast-facing slope, which it wasn't actually on a flat area. So it was quite strange. There was a clear terminus on the northwest end. However, the northeast corner is very heavily truncated and all but disappears. So we're not quite sure what this enclosure may have actually ended up forming a square, or would have continued all the way out to the edge of site, but it's now long gone. Enclosed a number of the features, as you can see, but the only contemporary feature that can be dated is a kiln in the north end. The rest of the features, a couple of them were dated to Bronze Age, but fire pits. The rest of them remain undated, and we didn't have any other material that could be dated from them. So this is the ditch here. So it's quite a substantial feature itself. So this is the northwest terminal end of it. The base steps into a narrow gully, which is quite similar to an ankle breaker, but this feature is also found in early medieval ditches themselves. So it's found along with a number of dikes. The only artifact that could date this feature, was actually no material that could be radiocarbon dated, was possible strap fitting, which is seen on the right here. There's no exact parallels. However, it's believed to date broadly between the late 8th to 11th centuries, which would make it contemporary with the kiln to the north of it. You can just about see the hints of decoration behind the iron rusting, hopefully. Yes, you should be able to. So that kiln, which I was mentioning before, which is contemporary with this L-shaped enclosure, It is located on the plateau, so the ditch is on the slope. This is at the plateau at the base of the slope. And the slope itself may have acted as a natural windbreak, which is why this kiln was here. There was no superstructure for the kiln, but there was the partial remains of a heat-affected stone surface. A discontinuous flue ran off to the northwest. You can see part of the flue there. There was another part further up. It had been possibly truncated by the plough in the middle of it. After this kiln fell out of use, it may have been used as a place to dump waste, as there were 2 early medieval loom weights, clay loom weights found there. You may be able to see one of them just sitting on the edge of the kiln on the right-hand side. And there was also sheep bones, a post-medieval pipe stem, and an unknown metal object found amongst the stones. Obviously, the clay loom weights would not have been associated with the kiln. They were a different type of industry. So this was radiocarbon dated to between the 7th and 9th century. So the L-shaped enclosure and this corn drying kiln are a couple of centuries later than the cremation itself. So that is the only feature on site dating to that period. Having a look at these fired clay loom weights. So these are consistent, the shape of them and the size are consistent with the dates of the kiln. So they are most likely contemporary. And it's suggesting that there's actually a contemporary settlement nearby, which has this other form of industry. It may have actually been within the site and has now been lost to the plough, but we will never know. Unfortunately, to the west of the area, there was an old historic quarry, which was then turned into a landfill, so there was no investigation there. And to the north is a woodland, so we won't be going into there. So finally, our last features are these 7 early medieval features in Area D, which is to the south of the site. So 3 of those features, which are outlined in red, represent ironworking furnaces, and the 3 in green are most likely the waste pits associated with them. The largest one on the southeast is thought to be contemporary based on the types of grain within it, and the sheer quantities of the grain within it is thought to be from a corn drying kiln accident or burnt corn store. This is about 500 meters away from the other corn drying kilns, so this might actually represent a second settlement which is nearby, or maybe just outside our area. Having a look at the ironworking furnaces, as you can see, they're not quite spectacular. They are quite shallow features. This could be through to the truncation, and they are relatively small. And so they were almost ignored on site, not ignored, but recorded and written about and reported. But it was only due to the radiocarbon dates that they were actually indicated as being early medieval. They were thought to be post-medieval dumpings of slag material. So actually it shows the importance of dating some of these features. So these were dated between the 8th and 10th centuries AD. And it's very important because early ironworking sites in the Lothians are scarce, as is early medieval, as is evidence of the early medieval period more generally. So it is important that these add to that, add to the record. An interesting stone carved object was found in the waste pit for 124, which is here. So this carved pebble is unique. We can't seem to find a comparison from it. So it's a series of carved lines down one long side of a pebble using the edge as the spine of a decoration. And it was most likely carved using a metal blade. There's 2 circular patches of metal residue on the side, which is the remains of a central stud or pin, and that may mean it was placed alongside, either tied to or resting against a metal object when it was deposited. As I said, there's no known comparisons, but it's believed to be contemporary with the ironworking pits, because it was cut with a metal blade and found within the ironworking pits. That would make it dating to the 8th to 10th century. Of course, if anyone has any better ideas of what this might be, we're very happy for someone to bring it up. But yes, but it is a beautiful little object. So finally, just to sum it up, you can see now with 2 areas of early medieval activity to the north and to the south. And as I said, in the 2 opposing corners of the site, these might represent 2 settlements that are either located just outside the quarry or the evidence is lost from within. There is also the chance that in the middle of them, which is that big green stretch for Galadine Plantation, the settlement exists underneath there, but we will never know. The quarry does plan on expanding to the features of the southwest, so we may get an answer, southeast, sorry, get an answer regarding the settlement, the ironworking, but we'll. Sure. So for updates on future publication, it's now drafted and hopefully will be submitted to SARE next year. So it'll be open access. Keep an eye on our social media and the website. And finally, thank you to everyone involved. There's, as I said, it's been running since 2008, so there's a lot of people to thank. They're all listed here. And thank you very much for listening today.